Greetings, fabulous friends. It's Innocence Kills here with a life update. Basically, I have ADHD. Now, there might be some of you who've looked over just this channel, my content, and just the kind of lack of rhyme or reason to it, and, think, well, that seems kind of a little bit obvious, maybe. Well, so, basically, the person who diagnosed me with OCD back in, God, when was that? 2021, well, it's 2023 now, so, a while ago, a long time ago, person who diagnosed me with OCD said at that time that, he was not a specialist in ADHD, but he recommended that I should get tested for that as well, but it took me until, well, this week to actually do that, and in the moment that I, got myself evaluated, it was all in a very, hyper-focused and hyper-aware kind of way, I'm doing this, I'm making the appointment for tomorrow, it's gonna still be fresh in my mind, I'm gonna do this, and I did it, and sure enough, yep, combined ADHD. Now, up until that moment where I got diagnosed with OCD, I was kind of under the impression that a person could not have both, that a person, had to have, basically, my thought was, well, it's rare to have either of these things, so it must be super duper rare to have both. But, and also, I guess I thought, okay, well, if a person has ADHD, then they must have, trouble in school, they must have had trouble, getting good grades and stuff like that. But I didn't. But the thing is, I wasn't factoring in the environment that I was in, when I was in high school, for instance. Okay, so I almost failed the first grade. I had so much trouble reading, figuring out how reading was supposed to work, that I almost completely failed first grade. And I don't necessarily know, because I didn't really have, awareness of my own grades back then, but I think I kind of struggled in everything. But my parents, very hyper-responsive, were well, we're going to transfer you schools and have you, work with all of these tutors, and we're going to catch you up, and that's just going to be how we're going to deal with this. And, well, that happened. They transferred me schools, and I worked with a bunch of tutors, and basically, I, dealt with the whole reading thing. But then the next thing was entrance exams to go to middle schools, you're failing them, and there's only one school that will take you, and it's, the worst of the private schools, and of course, going to public school is not an option, because, there's this thing going on with you, whatever it is, but basically, my parents were very much, they very much pushed the narrative of, oh, well, you had trouble, reading, you conquered it, now it's over, triumph, But there were all these other things, so, with a lot of help, I dealt with school, and, I got through it, but there were all of these other things, if I ate something, then, putting my dishes away. Putting my dishes away at school was not a problem for me, because it was such a, routine thing, and, teachers would be you got everybody has to do this at the same time. Like, everybody's, putting their dishes away. That's just what you do here. That's what we do here. But at home, it was so difficult because, I would just not be thinking about it. I would not be, reminded of it, so I wouldn't do it. And then, my parents would get really, really angry with me, oh, well, what do you think, that we're your maid? You're just gonna leave dishes here? Who do you think is gonna clean those up? And it's no, literally, I forgot that the dish existed. It's not that I went through the thought process of, oh, no, I think that you're supposed to clean up after me. It was I literally just forgot that the dish existed. Whereas at school, it was impossible to forget that the dish existed, because there's teachers actively reminding you. And basically, when it came to, when it came to homework and school and stuff, I did have a lot of trouble, focusing on it, but, I had these, ways that I would do it, sort of ritualized in my head, where it was okay, well, whatever the thing is that I want to do the least, that's what I'm going to do first, and then when it's over, I'll feel relieved from that, and then there's, the next thing, and so that the thing that I was doing last was the thing that was easiest, the thing that was most pleasurable, whatever. So, for me, that basically meant, science homework first, then math, then history, then English, German, creative writing, things that I excelled at last. But my OCD would scream at me that, I was a failure and I was an awful person because I had trouble, focusing on things that I didn't want to do, and it would just tell me oh, because this thing is different about you, you're a terrible person. So it got to the point where I had this compulsive need to get all of my homework done as soon as possible. Any homework that I was assigned on Friday to do over the weekend, I had to do it right away, and that was such a thing that I was conscious of. So that was why I think I sought treatment for my OCD first, because, I was more, I guess, self-aware of it. I was aware that I would go into a panic if I allowed my homework to, hang over me or whatever. But then, at the same time, I wasn't thinking about how if somebody wasn't actively reminding me to do things deal with dishes and laundry, I would just not. Or maybe I would get it together to bring the dishes to the sink, but then that was where it would end. I would wash the laundry and then dry it, but then it might take me weeks to put it away. Or years ago I wanted to start this podcast. I talked about it a whole bunch. I recorded episode 1, but I never put it out. And it's not I didn't want to or I lost interest. It's I just couldn't make it happen. So it's I would have these executive function issues, but then these intrusive thoughts about how because I had these issues, I was awful, and so then I would compulsively focus on something. So maybe the homework that I'm assigned today, maybe it's not actually due for a whole week, but I am going to compulsively do it until it's done as if it's due, at midnight tonight. I'm gonna panic as if the deadline is coming up. Or I know I need to do this laundry sometime, but there's nobody else who's going to know whether I did it or not other than me. There's nobody I'm disappointing by not doing it, so, that just, drifts away. So that's what, I guess, being in my brain looked like for me, is that I would punish myself for, my natural issues. My natural issue, focusing, staying on task. I have that issue, I have time blindness. That makes me a bad person, so I'm gonna overcompensate. So, if I had to wake up early if I had to wake up at like 6 a.m. tomorrow for whatever reason, I would start panicking about it like the day before. And to the point that I wouldn't be able to sleep, I would just stay up all night and to make sure that I was on time for whatever I needed to be on time for. Or like, so like that's an OCD thing, but I think like it's an OCD thing that I have because of the innate ADHD. Like, because it would be so easy for me to sleep through that alarm, to be late, to, not do the thing properly, I am going to obsess over it and punish you, like, with it until it's done, essentially. So that's how that would work. Or, like, I can't drive. Like, I'm so worried about possibly hurting somebody with a car, like getting into an accident that, somebody else gets hurt by, that I just avoid cars, and I don't avoid cars, but I avoid driving. Like, I, take the bus, I walk, I take the light rail, I take lift cars, but I can't drive. I just won't, like, I can't. So that's an OCD thing, but it's also an OCD thing that is there because of my, like, ADHD tendency to just drift. That's how my parents described it. They said I was drifty. But I guess, like, they never saw it as debilitating because even though they might need to hire, like, tutors to help me get through certain classes or whatever, I always did. But then in college, it was different, right? Because there wasn't that, like, parental structure around me, and I was more, like, in control of how and when I did things. So the OCD thing, rather, of, like, having to get things done right away, that's still there. But, like, I think that I just understand it more. So the ADHD, I think of it like Newton's law of inertia, right? An object at motion stays in motion, an object at rest stays at rest. Basically, when I'm still, it's really hard for me to get moving. Like, it's really hard for me to shift from being still to being in motion, and vice versa. That's the ADHD thing, right? But the thing that knocks me from one into the other is, like, the OCD thing. So, like, if I'm still and I'm stuck and I'm, like, I really know that what I need to do is I need to edit, my magazine article, with the deadline coming up on May 1st, and, I need to update my website to have, the next show that I've been booked for, I need to call venues so that I can get myself more bookings, I need to work on this novel of mine, like, all of these things I need to do, and those things are scarier to think about, so it's like, oh, well, I also need to do laundry and dishes, so I'm going to use those as procrastination tactics, and since my girlfriend will be upset if she comes home and laundry's not done, and she'll be happy if she comes home and it is done. Not saying my girlfriend's making me do it or anything, but it's like in my brain, it's like, well, I can make her happy if I do it, so I get the dopamine from her being appreciative, but also I can avoid doing this other thing. And that's the thing, like, the more I've been on my own in my adulthood, the more, like, obvious kind of these things and the way they work together in my brain have become. But because of the structure that my parents provided, I think I just never, like, even though I might have been aware of it internally, and that's why I had all of these systems in place, my parents just saw it as, like, okay, well, kid always gets homework done, kid doesn't get in trouble at school, even though, kid spends, hours, like, staring at the wall, seemingly doing nothing, or the TV, but, like, not really watching, as long as everything eventually gets done, we're good here. But in adulthood, it's a lot harder. I have trouble with, like, traditional day jobs where I'm supposed to be in the same place, like, the same time every day. Like, I have trouble with that much structure. Like, it just, my brain can't, my body can't. Like, I need to be creative, I need to be performative. Like, I like writing articles because if I get, like, a burst of inspiration at 3 a.m., then that's fine. Like, I can just lean into that. Like, you know, hosting my open stage is a good thing for me because it's, you know, a couple of hours during the week when I get to be there, and I can just play whatever songs I may have worked on that week. Like, I can just roll with the punches that life gives me, and it works. And that's the thing, is that when I kind of just allow myself to embrace and roll with my ADHD and not fight against it, my OCD gets better. Like, I only have to worry about, like, it's true that if, like, my open stage night starts at 7 p.m. on Sundays, it's true that I start thinking about it, you know, like, on Saturday, like, but I know that I can be awake and functional by the time it's, like, 5 p.m. I know I can do that. And I know that if I'm awake and functional by 5 p.m., then I can just sort of get over to the venue and, like, I know I can do that. Like, I know I can manage that. But that's the thing. It's not like I have this thing where it's like I need people to think I'm special and I need all the attention on me. It's more like I need to be interested in my own life and my own circumstances in order for me to be okay, basically. So, I've not done any editing here. Like, this is probably a little bit all over the place, but I kind of needed to get this off my chest because it just makes a lot of things about my life make sense. Thank you very much for your patience. You know, I appreciate you, and have a blessed day.